think everyone recognises that over this past 10, 15 years, there's been an enormous drop in the number of people seeking to discern a vocation to the priesthood religious life. However, over this past 5 or 6 years, after a very clear fall, there's actually been a remarkable stability, and in some quarters of the Irish Church, a most unexpected, perhaps almost inexplicable rise. A number of religious congregations have had very healthy numbers coming in over this past couple of years. However, I think we were used in Ireland to perhaps a model that assumed that the priest did absolutely everything, which really was keeping many people in a comparatively childish position in the church. I think the vocations to priesthood and religious life, those who wish to dedicate themselves full-time to ministry within the people of God, have to be recognised not just as a problem, but also as an invitation from the Lord to envision a new model of church. There's no sense in imagining we can go back to an old model of church when many reports that we've heard actually complain about the problems of that way of being Catholic in Ireland. Therefore, I think it's an invitation from the Spirit of God to find a new way of being church, to find new sorts of vocation within the church, while at the same time recognising the key part that is played by the fact of the Eucharist being at the heart of who we are as a Eucharistic people. I'd say two things to that question. One, I think we have to be very careful that there's certainly the possibility of some people coming along who've tried other things, who can't get a job here or there, and say, well, I'll try the priesthood or religious life. It sounds a reasonably steady way forward. I think we have to be very careful of not just going for numbers, but ensuring that we help people to discern in the depths of their heart what God is calling them to, and that they're moving in not to a job, but to a whole way of life. Just as marriage is a whole way of life, and the single life is a whole way of life. So I think we have to be very careful about not just jumping and taking numbers just because people think, I'll give it a try. On the other hand, I think the financial crisis is also a real existential crisis for many people. And I think the economic collapse that we've experienced over this past couple of years perhaps is asking us to ask real questions about what is important in life. What makes my life meaningful? Who am I as a human being? Am I a human being or just a human haver of things? So I think it's important to allow the questions that do come up because of times of crisis, because of times of despair and lack of hope. Allow those questions to be answered, but allow people to be in touch with themselves and not just in touch with the search for a reasonably comfortable job. The role of those who will be full-time ministers in the church, whether ordained or consecrated or lay, will be a difficult time. And it's important to ensure that those who seek to take on ministry are prepared for the real challenges that lie ahead and don't see ministry as some sort of a safe refuge into which they can flee at a difficult time. I think there's a recognition in Ireland, yes, that we are happy to have priests and religious coming from other countries, generally to help the co-nationals, people who speak their own language, to celebrate, to build communities of faith, to integrate and to feel that they've got someone who understands where they're coming from and where they're going to. On the other hand, I think the Pope's letter for Vocation Sunday is very clear that one of the signs of health in a local community is that it's actually able to sustain its own vocations. In other words, bringing people in from outside, while it may fill gaps, is not necessarily a sign of health. Yes, a local church in a developing country 100 years ago may have needed priests and religious from outside to help them. But I think any Irish church or any future for the Irish church has to be based on the church renewing itself and on that deep call of the Lord for people to have various ministries within the body of Christ, to build up that body of Christ in a way that bears witness and offers hope to our current generation. So I think the focus really has to be local in building up the Christian community with its various charisms, rather than just bringing people in from outside to fill gaps. think that was a very interesting experiment in 2008, 2009, where we weren't saying this is a career promotion event, but we wanted actually to try a national catechesis, not deep Christian belief that people are called by God. Our society tells us so much about our options, our right to choose, and the real mystery of being called by God into life, that real mystery that we are called to live life to the full and can do so best of all through a knowledge of what the Lord, or through a discernment of what the Lord is calling us to become. I think, yes, the year of vocation was an attempt at a national catechesis on that. We have learned, I hope, some things from how we can best utilise a theme like that, but I think unless there is a sense at the bottom of all Christian faith that God has called us into life and calls us to salvation, calls us into a relationship with one another and with God, then I think we haven't a good understanding of what the Christian faith is about. It's essentially about a series of relationships based on the initiative of God. You did not choose me, I chose you, and I called you to go forth and bear fruit, and to bear fruit abundantly. I think that's one of those things that doesn't entrap us, but actually is liberating, because it says God values my life. My life's of infinite worth. I can render some unique service, as John Henry Newman said. There's something that my life can do that no one else's life can do in modern society. And therefore I think it's very important that we have that constant sense of being called, being given a name by God, and being given enormous value. That things I do and love are of eternal beauty and value. In other words, in an era which looks for hope, looks for meaning, an era that's perhaps very often tempted to despair, God says, I have called you by your name, and you are mine. I have carved you on the palm of my hand. I have a dream for you. Yes, therefore, the sense of vocation underlines not just the particular jobs we do in church, but our whole sense of being called into the people of God, into relationship with God, and into relationship with other people. That provides a context for who I am as an individual, for my discernment. It provides a context where I have access to a vast range of resources at times of crisis, at times of growth, at times of challenge, at times of opportunity. And therefore I think, yes, the idea of vocation is a fundamental one in the Christian faith. That is part of the good news that the New Catechetical Directory asks us to proclaim. And therefore the sense of vocation to individual ministries, lay and ordained and consecrated, will be strongest when the whole community has a sense of being called by name as a community and as individuals to the service of God and to the healing of the world. And precisely through that, not to being a slave, but to living life to the full, in, through, and because of the Lord who calls us.